You wake to the taste of iron and dust in your mouth. Your eyelids feel like grit. The world hangs between dark and light. The sky bruised blue, the field a quilt of mud and smashed grass. Your hand finds earth, cold, clotted, soil sticky at the knuckles. A muffled boom rolls, distant as thunder. Your ribs remember the shock before the sound arrives. A smell layers in, smoke, sour and leathery with spent powder. A metallic note like coins on a tin table. You try to move. Boots press into the wet dirt. A voice, near and quick, whispers orders or prayers, you cannot tell which. Hands touch yours, efficient and brief. A bandage is tied without ceremony. As dawn light leaks, the shapes resolve. A fence post, a broken wagon wheel, the blurred silhouette of a horse. Far off, a steeple stands against the pale, a slow question on the horizon. A child's shawl flutters on a fence like a flag that forgot to belong to anyone. Around you, breathing, low groans, the metallic click of buckles. For a moment, you do not know which is louder, the roar in the distance or the thump of your own heart. This is the first day. The ground tastes of history and of fear. Breathe, move, listen. The next 3 days will ask everything of you. We will follow one person's footsteps through 3 days, not to replay tactics, but to feel what it was like to be there. We'll trace small human threads. A medic's choice at dawn, a mother's frightened walk to a makeshift hospital, the quiet, exhausted kindness between comrades. Between those vignettes, we'll step back, briefly, to explain what was at stake, how families and a nation were reshaped, and why Gettysburg's aftermath echoed for generations. This is a story of suffering and stubborn care, of ordinary people pressed into extraordinary moments. Stay with the details. The maps will follow the heart. Gettysburg did not happen in isolation. By the summer of 1863, America was a nation pushed to its limits. Politically stretched, economically taxed, and morally divided by the question of slavery. For the Confederacy, invading northern soil offered more than a battlefield victory. It offered hope. Hope of easing pressure on Virginia farms. Hope of drawing foreign attention. Hope of fraying northern will. For the Union, the stakes were existential in a different register. Abraham Lincoln faced a fragile political coalition and growing war weariness. Every headline mattered. Every casualty list tightened the knot of politics at home. Victory could steady a shaky public and vindicate the Union cause. Defeat could push Americans toward negotiation, and with emancipation now part of the war's meaning, the consequences would ripple into the lives of millions. And for town residents, the people who lived on these fields, the question was immediate and personal. Would their barns, their shops, their children survive an army's passage? Gettysburg's fields were also farms, households, and churches. A battle here would not only slay or scatter soldiers, it would reconfigure community life and memory. This was a contest both military and civic. It would help decide whether a riven republic could hold together, and how the choices made on these fields would shape freedom, politics, and everyday life for generations to come. They come in pieces at first. Riders on dusty roads, single wagons with flags of need, small groups that swell into a crowd. Confusion is the first language, half-heard orders, couriers running with papers, a farmer staring at men in unfamiliar coats. The town wakes into a war it did not invite. Soldiers spill from the road like scattered flotsam. Some stumble, dazed. Some march with eyes set on nothing. Men who yesterday were neighbors find themselves aligned by command. Voices overlap, questions, sharp orders, a mother calling a child's name that answers like an echo. Makeshift hospitals form in churches, schoolrooms, and large attics. Tables become operating benches. A woman weaves bandages by candlelight. A pot simmers on an overturned crate to heat water. A baker lifts a stretcher. A clerk carries supplies. The language is not rank. It is care. Children watch. Curiosity braided with fear. A boy brings water. A girl sews buttons. An old man repeats names he hopes are safe. Letters are read aloud. Some bring relief. Some fall the color of silence. Through the chaos runs a stubborn kindness. Soldiers sharing a blanket. Strangers pooling flour. A surgeon pausing to wipe his hands and breathe. This is day one. A sudden reordering of ordinary life. Who will care? Who will carry on? Who will be left to remember? July 1st. I light this by a candle and the last of our coffee. The earth still shakes from guns that do not sleep. We marched through dawn and found a field full of strangers' faces and familiar ones worn into new shapes. John from the next farm carries a wound that will not let him talk. He spits, curses, and then asks for his mother's bread. I tied a strip of cloth at his jaw and told him he would laugh about this when he was older. He did not laugh. We ate what we could snatch, stale biscuit shared 3 ways, a slice of bacon carried like treasure. The sky smells of smoke and something metallic I cannot name. At one point, a child, a brown shawl on a fence, watched us pass as if we were a storybook. It felled me, more than the cannon. Tell Mary I kept the small carved horse she gave me. If I walk away whole, it will be by that little thing's fault. Tell her not to fear the worst, until the worst is written. We hold each other, because there is no other language for it. Tonight we bind wounds, whisper names, and borrow a breath between orders. If this reaches you, know this: we are frightened, we are kind, and we remember home. She counts with hands used to fence wire and shelled beans. 1 pot, 2 quilts, 3 plates. Everything that can move without a wagon. The house smells of wood smoke and starch. On the table lies a small loaf wrapped in linen. She thinks of tiny things. A child's left shoe, a button off a Sunday dress, the name on a milk pail. Then the riders arrive. Not a rumor, but a line of dust and leather. She slips the loaf into a pocket, takes the child's hand, and they go toward the church, because the minister said it would be safer. On the porch, a neighbor leaves a pot. A woman passes a wrapped bundle of biscuits. Barter and bravery stitch together the slow choreography of survival. At the church, they lay a quilt over a pew and whisper instructions. Who will fetch water? Who will hold lids? Who will keep watch for the wounded? A boy returns with a tin cup and eyes that have seen too much. The child leans against her knee and asks, "Will Father come?" She hums a tune that is more hope than answer. She will not promise. She will cradle what she can, name what she cannot carry, and wait. The town wakes with a silence heavier than noise. Cellars crowd with children, quilts, and jars of pickled fruit. Women press their palms against plaster walls, listening for the sound that never really stops. Hooves, boots, wheels. The shuffle of men too tired to lift their knees. On the ridges, soldiers scrape shallow trenches with tin plates and bayonets. A letter, half written, is folded into a boot. One man whispers a prayer he will never say aloud. By mid-morning, the air is thick with rumors that reinforcements have arrived, that they will not come, that the ground is already lost. Each word passes like sparks across dry straw. And then, cannon fire. Not a roar, but a rolling echo, distant and low, like a storm crossing the mountains. Faces turn upward, horses rear. In cellars and on hillsides alike, everyone knows. The waiting is over. The battle has truly begun. I move like a shadow between rows, not to hide, but because the world here is broken into lanes of need. A man lies half-turned in the mud, his uniform sodden. A woman kneels beside him. Her face is a map of worry. I check a pulse, press fingers where the body answers, and make choices in seconds that feel like a lifetime. Which limb must be bound first? Who can wait? Who cannot? The artillery makes the horizon into a living thing, thumps rolling through the chest and kicking up fine dust from the grass. Each blast brings another river of men and horses, some stumbling, some strangely silent. We drag stretchers under shouted orders and softer private instructions. Name? Hold. Lucy, bring hot water. Names are small anchors. They keep a person from being only noise. Inside a barn converted to a ward, light slips through slats and touches rows of bundled forms. A mother mends a torn sleeve while a surgeon steadies a man with a hand on the shoulder. The hands work in a language of habit and mercy. Civilians bring quilts, boiled water, a pot of thin broth. A child peeks at the doorway and is gathered into arms without question. At dusk, we fasten a ledger to a post and write names as they arrive. For the living, and for those we hope to send letters to, and for those we do not. The ledger is not finality. It is a promise to remember. The landscape of suffering is also a landscape of care, small, stubborn acts that hold people together when the world unravels. He is a farmer by habit more than choice. His hands still smell of cut hay when the first rumble comes. On the second day, the field looks different. Trampled rows, men moving like a slow tide across his land. He closes the barn door and counts what will fit on one wagon. A trunk, 2 quilts, a crate of jars. The rest gets a note pinned to it. Leave for neighbors, and he prays someone will read it. She, a neighbor, moves through the village like a small, steady light. She carries water from the well and lends a shawl. Her child is smaller now in the hubbub. Eyes map a world of carts and faces with no names. She teaches the child to fold blankets the way her mother taught her, a task to keep hands busy and the mind from unmaking. At midday, a horse bolts. The farmer steadies it with an old rope, and in the motion offers a hand to a disoriented soldier. It is a brief exchange that feels enormous. Bread split, a bowl passed, a whispered, "God keep you." Later, when the day leaves the fields ragged and hushed, they find a stranger's boot and lay it on a fence post, a small marker for someone's lost way. Names are read aloud. Children are cradled. Someone goes into town to fetch a doctor. These are not grand acts of heroism. They are the small choices that keep life moving. To share water, tie a shoelace, say a neighbor's name so the ledger will remember. In the fog of war, these mercies are the stories people will tell their grandchildren. By the evening of the second day, the hills around Gettysburg had become more than just ground. They were lifelines. Cemetery Hill, with its stone walls and battered gravestones, became a fortress of the living among the markers of the dead. Soldiers crouched behind headstones, whispering prayers as artillery thundered above them. Farther south, on Little Round Top, men clung to boulders slick with dust and sweat. The fight for the ridge was fierce, but within it were smaller moments. A soldier passing his last sip of water to a wounded comrade. An officer's voice, strained, breaking as he urged men to hold on just a little longer. To stand on these rocks was to stand at the edge of survival. Each hill became not only a military position, but a place where ordinary men endured the extraordinary. Where history bent, not by grand design, but by countless individual acts of endurance and quiet defiance. You wake to orders and the iron taste of fear. The line moves like a single breath. Forward, forward, and everything in you measures distance in heartbeats. The ground ahead is not a field but a decision. Open country, a low stone wall far across, flags like stubborn flowers. Men shout, then fall into a steady step. Your boots scuff thin grass and clay. A brother-in-arms presses a scrap of paper into your hand, a name folded tight. You tuck it under a button. It will be a small thing to hold if the world gets too loud. Then the sky opens with sound. Cannon first, a rolling voice that rides the ribs of the earth. Musket cracks like distant hail. Air trembles. Dust rises in waves. Each blast punctuates the step. 1, 2, 3, and still the line moves. You see men fall the way a tree falls in a quiet wood. Sudden, then final. You cannot look away. To look away is to lose the tether that keeps you moving. Someone offers water from a dented canteen. You drink. It tastes of iron and kindness. The wall draws nearer, stone like a small city of memory. For a breath you imagine home. A woman at a window, a dog stirring, a child's laughter. That image keeps you from counting the paces. Then time collapses into motion and noise. A single heavy minute stretches like an hour. Courage is small and quiet. A jacket handed over. A whispered name. A strap tightened on a gun. Confusion threads through. Orders lost in smoke. Directions thin as paper. The line meets resistance. The world narrows to breath. After the charge, the field becomes a different country. Silence arrives in fragments. A dropped hat, a broken drum. Men with stretchers moving slow. They tie a ledger to a post and write names as they come in. Fingers tremble over ink. People cradle what remains. Letters, a carved horse, a scarf on a stake. The ledger is not finality. It is care. It says, "You were here. We remember." If you walk this ground today, you will find stone and grass and quiet. But if you listen, you will hear the small human things that outlast strategy. The cup passed, the scrap of paper, the stubborn thread of kindness that kept strangers human in the loudest hour. When the smoke thins, a new work begins. The field that was motion becomes a room of tasks. To find breath where breath remains, to move the living, to fold the dead with care. Men who minutes before chased orders now become carriers, loaders, and quiet clerks of fate. Makeshift hospitals appear from chance and need. Barns propped open, schoolrooms cleared of benches, church aisles lined with straw. Home things become surgical tools, kitchen knives to cut clothing, sheets rolled into bandages, churns upended for boiling water. A surgeon, cheeks streaked with soot, steadies a man while a neighbor holds a lamp. Hands move in a language of habit and mercy. There is a ritual to the after, names asked and repeated, letters tucked into pockets, a carved toy slipped into a bundle. Children are held close. A woman hums as she sews. A boy returns with hot water. The ledger grows heavy with ink and trembling script, names for those we tend, and names for those we may later mark with soil. Burial parties move with slow, intentional rhythm. Graves are dug by a fence, beneath a lone tree, beside a stone. The acts are plain. A folded coat, a hat set at the head, 3 quiet knocks on earth. There is no pageant here, only the economy of grief and the small, sacred work of remembrance. A stake is driven, a scrap of cloth tied until something permanent can be made. The work of care answers the violence not with words, but with tending, with naming, and with the stubborn practice of carrying on. War does not end when the guns fall silent. The cost travels home by post, on horseback, and by the slow footfall of returning men who are not the same. Letters arrive first, folded pages with shaky handwriting that change a household's course. A wife reads aloud. The table is cleared. A quilt is folded. A cash box opens. The letter can be a mercy, or it can be the start of months without wages. Families reorganize. Women run shops and farms. Neighbors trade labor and food. Children learn work earlier than they should. A cobbler bakes bread for a season. A shopkeeper turns a front room into a sleeping place for a wounded neighbor. Then men come home, some with limp steps, some with hands that no longer fit plow tools, some with eyes that still hold the night. Towns must absorb them. Work shifts from field to mill. Women's earnings and community charity fill the gaps. Some sell land to survive. Some pack a single trunk and follow a railhead toward factory work or open plains. The economic ripple redraws maps and plans. Grief and adaptation sit side by side. A carved toy kept in a pocket. A headstone added to a yard. A widow's faded bonnet. These are the small ledgers of life after battle, costs counted in the hush between chores and the long, patient work of rebuilding.
Gettysburg did not happen only to soldiers. Its shock moved through households, through women managing absence and labor, postal riders carrying news that remade lives, and enslaved people whose futures were roiled by armies and proclamations. Some enslaved people seized the chance to slip toward Union lines. Others stayed, sheltering kin as best they could. Freed people in nearby towns watched, prayed, and organized relief, offering food, shelter, and labor in communities already strained. Women stitched and cooked. They counted rations and negotiated with passing officers for medicine and protection. Postal workers, often invisible in wartime stories, kept messages moving, folding distance into a single page that could change a life in an afternoon. These are the unsung angles, small, decisive acts that do not make the battle maps, but remake daily life. When we measure Gettysburg's cost, we must also count these labors of survival and solidarity, the quiet choices that reshaped families and nudged the arc of freedom.
You stand among rows of hastily dug graves. The ground is uneven, the smell of lime still sharp in the air. Months later, the nation turns its eyes here. Gettysburg, once a small Pennsylvania town, becomes sacred ground, a place that must carry meaning, not just memory. When Lincoln arrives in November, he speaks only a few hundred words. Yet those words reach beyond the battle. They bind the Union dead to a promise of rebirth, a new birth of freedom. Gettysburg shifts from tragedy into symbol. Soldiers who had no choice become part of a larger story, the remaking of a nation. In memory, the battle does not end. It grows. It becomes a touchstone for politics, for speeches, for the way Americans understand sacrifice itself. The blood in these fields turns into language that will echo far beyond 1863. You step onto the field, and the past arrives like weather. The stone is cold under your hand. Grass moves where men once moved in ordered terror. Names on markers look like pins on a map. It is harder to hear the small things, the scrap of a letter, the weight of a toy, the cadence of a mother humming at a kitchen table. Remembering is not only monument and text, it is the slow work of listening, to silence, to birds, to the ground. Walk these rows and carry those small things forward. Thank you for walking this ground with us. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more history told close to the human scale. Links in the description include primary sources, museums, and recommended reading. The National Park Service records, Library of Congress collections, the American Battlefield Trust, and major histories. A quick note, we used dramatized vignettes to help imagine lives, not to replace original documents. Where possible, we provide source citations in the video description and pinned comment. If this raised questions, drop them below. We read every comment. If you found value, like, share, and subscribe. It helps these stories reach people who should hear them.